Welcome to the Paper Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan James. Today, we have an amazing guest. His name is Aaron Kahler. He is the founder and CEO of Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, also known as ATII. He's also founder and co-chair of Anti-Human Trafficking Cryptocurrency Consortium, Anti-Human Trafficking Retail Consortium. Basically, he is the person who trains law enforcement on financial crimes related to human trafficking. So this is the go-to, bankers, to follow, to see what you can do to be on your game and to make sure that you've got the right typology and presets put into your AML system so we can do our part and we can monitor human trafficking. Hope you enjoy. Aaron, welcome to the Paper Podcast. It's so great to have you. Tell me a little bit. How did you get involved, and how did you come to start the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. I spent 20 years in the financial crime industry. Started really early in my career. Worked for the New York State Attorney General's office, investigating fraud and crime. Interned with MasterCard within their fraud department, where I looked at a wide variety of fraud, but also investigated child exploitation and CSAM. Back then, child pornography was called. I have a degree in economic crime investigation from Syracuse University. So very early on in my career, I focused on financial crime. Got into banking compliance and anti-money laundering, spent most of my career in advisory around that. And then in 2019, we founded the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. Big reason behind that was, over the last 5 years before I started it, 10 years or so, lots of people in the AML and financial crime industry, the anti-money laundering industry, were talking about human trafficking. It became a hot topic. FinCEN, regulatory body that enforces financial crime, started giving guidance on human trafficking. And I started thinking about what I was telling my clients, the different type of risks that they can be exposed to in banks, and really just started educating myself a lot on it and realized that there was a lot missing as far as training, red flags, typologies, data, information that can make people, gatekeepers in the financial industry, do their job better. And really got interested in that. And then in turn also, of course, started learning more about the actual industry of human trafficking and the survivors and the hardships and everything around modern slavery, and decided that I was ready to take my career to the next step and put my money where my mouth is and get really involved in it.
I'm very familiar with your work and your initiative, and as a banker, we see so much. Now, granted, it may not be the whole picture, but we see transactions. Whether it's via ACH. And I found it's been very difficult for bankers, where to go to and where to look out. So I'm so excited to have found you and your work. And, there's a lot of kind of noise out there. There's a lot of banking regulations out there, but this is one that, I would feel confident that 100% of bankers should all rally behind. Anything that we can do to spot human trafficking, is top of mind. And I sit on our SAR committee. So, this is one of the tougher things to identify for us. And, it's a lot of training and we go through a lot, but we probably should start from the beginning and give the definition of, human trafficking, what to look for, because I think what first comes to mind may be sex trafficking, but there's a whole lot to that, labor trafficking, and they're, so
yeah,
if you could give a couple of the main definitions.
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that number one, I'm not an expert on human trafficking. That's left to the survivors and people that went through it, and victims, and the providers that deal with this every day and helping people and everything. I'm an expert in financial crime and investigation. That being said, obviously, finance is the main driver behind this, and what's used to fuel traffickers and this to happen. So there's a large correlation between human trafficking and sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and so forth. And you know, we have a unique focus on financial crime and tax evasion and money laundering, and some of the what people consider the more extreme focuses, like terrorist financing and so forth. But there's nothing more important, in my opinion, or at least I'd like to keep the scrutiny and the focus at the same level as some of our biggest threats, which terrorist financing, human trafficking. There's nothing more worse than that in an industry. And at the end of the day, if all the drugs and drug trafficking we're going to dry up, and the poppy fields in Afghanistan and the cocaine, where do you think organized crime and terrorists and traffickers are going to be focusing their attention to make money? Human trafficking. You you use a drug once and it's gone. You can use a victim, 8 times a day, 9 times a day.
Yeah.
So it's a very important issue that, although, like you said, Ryan, banks should rally around this and do more, but should's the key
Absolutely.
word in that sentence, and not all of them do. In fact, you would be really surprised if we were going to ask, do a poll of the largest banks in the world, mid-sized banks, small banks, and get an idea of how many of them actually just have a basic training, let alone a risk model and flags and data and a focus on it in and of itself. So we've come quite a way in the past 5-10 years, but not even close. We are not even close.
Unfortunately, I agree with that sentiment because, we're considered small bank, but what we do and take this seriously because we have, what the banking industry considers high risk customers, whether it be money service businesses, cryptocurrency related customers. We take BSA and AML, so strongly. And there's customers that come to us and apply, and then we ask questions, and they constantly, well, our bank never asked for this. Our bank never
Yeah.
asked this. And who you bank for? And it'll be a bank with the resources 50 times their size, and they don't do anything. So much gets left, falls, below the radar. And then another thing that we really see too is banks may be really afraid the bank industries. And so then that drives it underground. And so they feel that, oh, I'm not banking this specific industry. So then I don't have to be trained in this because,
Yeah.
I mean, what have you in financial crimes? What are some of the industries that you may see at a lot of banks or that go through the banking system that aren't documented or are not front and center?
Yeah, quickly, I'll just say, on the note of the community banks and federal savings banks and credit
Mhm.
unions, the smaller banks, we have had, and other groups have had a great deal of success working with those type of banks around this. In from a perspective of a community feel, it's easy to work with folks in that space because their leadership, their board wants to make a difference and can quickly act and implement things. Oftentimes, also the community banks in regions that are known for human trafficking. in your case, Florida and Georgia are widely known for human trafficking. So,
Mhm.
and news and industry in Florida, Georgia, the Southeast covers it a great deal. So it's on the radar of people. So I didn't want to come across like I was knocking certain banks. I've actually had just as much, if not more, success with smaller banks than larger banks.
That's great to hear. And
Yeah,
yeah, located here in Florida, it doesn't matter where you are. We're loaded the high intensity drug corridors. I mean, everywhere you turn, I mean, because you've got I-95, I-4, I-75. It is a hub. So, I mean, every bank
yeah,
located
but
in Florida has to have a robust BSA department.
yeah. But going back to your previous question, I think what you're asking about, different industries that you can see facilitating trafficking in different ways. Um, you know, with COVID, over the last few years, live streaming and internet type grooming and reaching out to folks and the industries that built around that have had a big boom and surplus. So fintech firms and payment firms that you can do peer-to-peer transactions and easy transactions like your Venmos, your Cash Apps, your Zells.
So
And
I've
I'm not
been
saying,
I've
yeah,
been
go ahead.
contacted many times by businesses that we would classify as third-party payment processors that will
Yep,
be conducting the transactions, and then as you dig, their customers or a portion of their customers could be cam shows or
yep,
adult, and they a lot of them will hide it, and then others will say this is what we do up front,
yep,
and we have stayed very far away from that. And when we do sit back and say, well, how is a bank even going to monitor this? You're like any program, you would take the risk and go down and underwrite the customer, how they're monitored and vice versa. But it's hard
yep,
for me to see how we could truly monitor a cam show. Not
yep. I'll one up you on that, on them hiding it. Not only are they hiding it when they reach out to your bank and try to set up an
Mhm.
account and build a relationship, they also hide it on the transaction. So when you're billed for your cam show, they're using different names and indicators not
Yeah.
indicative of the name of the company. For two reasons: to throw off the trail of investigators and people that are monitoring accounts, but also so if you're sharing a credit card with a spouse or whatever, it's not easy to detect. It's not going to say live cam girls XXX
Yeah.
on your credit card statement or your monthly billing statement. So one thing that we do, especially over the last few years, and with all these cam shows and sex sites and the dark web, and you've got your OnlyFans and firm companies like this that are popping up everywhere. We scrape and talk to banks, and we capture the different billing descriptors of the common ones out there,
That's good.
especially the ones that have been, when it comes to trust and safety and other non AML type reviews on the worst of the worst. We want to be able to have those billing descriptors so we can provide to financial institutions, um, to look for these type of
Yeah, because
transactions.
any bank may have a personal account that sees an ACH deposit from that billing description.
Yep.
And, then that comes back to knowing your customer, you know, having that flag, seeing that description, put it in your AML software, and having the trained staff that is able to reach out and question these transactions and be able to,
Yep.
interpret and hear.
Yeah, in general, not just with cam shows, but with sex trafficking and labor trafficking in general, transactions are important. They provide clues, they provide red flags and things that should pop out to you. But at the end of the day, the know your customer, and the due diligence around that, and understanding differences in what you think the account, the customer should be about, and discrepancies is really what should stand out. The transactions are fuel and indicators that can help, but going back to that KYC and understanding whether it's an individual's account, a business's account, and seeing the discrepancies in transactional behavior is like any AML or financial crime investigation is what should stand out. And of course, the problem with human trafficking and detecting it and seeing it from a transactional perspective is many times it looks like other financial crimes, especially drug trafficking, but also just general tax evasion and money laundering and cash structuring and depositing and withdrawing cash in different ways. That can be indicative of many financial crimes, not including human trafficking. So you need more context.
That is what we've found. And when we have a suspicion of possible, one that comes up to mind was, their profession was, indicative of somebody that would make maybe $20,000 to $40,000 a year, depending on that. But yet there was transactions of 100,000 plus in just a couple months. And then when we did some social engineering, it came down to, okay, the address of where they lived, that wasn't in a house. The house was not associated with them on the name. So there was just a lot of missing questions. We didn't have access to the rest of the picture, but what truly you could tell there is the source of funds was not there. So it seems to be like, it's hard to pinpoint. Yes, that is human trafficking for a SAR, but it seems to be that you can catch it for source of funds and other key money laundering that is associated with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and human trafficking, the indicators and the transactions, they, like many crimes, but even more so with human trafficking, they tell a story. When you're looking at transactions and you see transactions occurring in different branches within the same city, other cities and states, late night ATM withdrawals, things happening near casinos and hotels late at night, purchases, large purchases at pharmacies and things like that. Even one of the common ones is late night red box purchases. These and excessive amount of movies being purchased from a red box. These survivors and victims need something to do when they're not working.
Oh, wow.
Just basic entertainment is something. So, lots of fast food and large convenience store spends to stock up on just basic food to
and thinking about it,
it's a lifestyle that tells a story through the transactions.
Knowing the typical banking AML softwares, majority of them are so, let's see, just white labeled and kind of have canned programs. Some of that behavior is not indicative to a lot of Americans. So that would be hard for the average BSA analyst to, spot that this is, unless it was, one account in such a volume that fast food, had to pay for a dozen people or so. I can see after the fact of once you found something, then you see those transactions, but that's a difficult one to catch up front for an analyst to see.
Yeah, and that's why I say that the transactions are important. They definitely provide clues and could give you a flag for something to look into. But at the end of the day, most of the time, the transactions themselves are not going to find it. You need more context around KYC and understanding your customer and relating those transactions to what the account is. And what the customer is, the account was open for and what about this person. In addition to that, where we excel and what we do with banks that we're working with is we curate data sets, and work with banks that and financial institutions and other types of commercial organizations to scrub their customer base and transactions against data sets that we curate to look for anomalies indicative of trafficking. And then, when they find a hit, they combine that with the transaction monitoring review, and oftentimes they'll either find information on something that didn't come across their radar from any type of transaction monitoring red flag, or they find something that did come across their radar based on a transaction monitoring flag, but they had no clue it would have been potentially trafficking related, and maybe they even filed a SAR and it was on, cash, cash structuring or tax evasion or money laundering or something along those lines.
How important are SARs? Because I think some bankers, we're not one of them, but some bankers think about, well, I'm just filing the SARs. It just goes into ethos and not being reviewed. We've actually seen action from our SARs over the years, which is fantastic, and we're very pleased when that happens. But we see that SARs are vital. How are you seeing that from your side?
Yeah, I've got good thoughts around it and bad thoughts around it, right? At first, you file that SAR, no matter what it's for, and it does go into the ethos, right? And then it's there in a repository with millions of others, and it's really based. What happens to said SAR is really based on, federal investigations, the severity of it, and then it trickles down to, your state, your city, your local, and who even has access within law enforcement to look at SARs in their states and in their cities, which is, for every state, it's unfortunately way less than you would ever suspect, as far as the types of law enforcement officers that are actually allowed Bank Secrecy Act to review SARs. So that's a little disheartening in general, and I don't want to be a downer about this, but it is the reality 100%. There are some states that, from a state level law enforcement perspective, they have one person or two person in the entire state that is legally allowed to review FinCEN database and look at SARs. Some states have more. At the federal level, that changes a bit, but there's only so many financial crime investigators, right? We're lacking in that department.
And what I've noticed over the
that being
years
said,
of reviewing subpoenas and working with law enforcement on things, I'm always surprised of what little knowledge they know in regards to just banking transactions. Some of them are fantastic, and the few rise above, but then the average one, they really have no clue.
Yeah, your average officer, even at the state level, that are looking at fraud crimes and so forth, really don't have that much. And if they do, they need to rely on a colleague in their department to do their SAR searches for them, and they themselves don't even have access. So it's, if in a perfect world, like, every time anything happens, a missing person, a murder, anything, in theory, you should be able to check SAR data for any crime that you're going to do that type of diligence on. But that's just not the case. You never know when an address, a previously used address, a previous phone number, email address, or some little piece of information from a SAR 10 years ago can help you solve a case. So in my opinion, the SAR should be way more widely used in just general law enforcement. But that's not the case. But again, not to be entirely negative, the bright side, or the better side of the suspicious activity reports right now, is that in 2017, after much petitioning and much work with FinCEN and from advocates and human trafficking folks, they've added a human trafficking checkbox to the SAR. So if your organization is sophisticated and understands human trafficking and gets trained, you have the option of checking that box that many of the other banks out there, that if they saw something, may file as like I said, structuring or tax evasion. You may know better within your institution from training and file a SAR based on human trafficking. And when that happens, there's a much better chance of that SAR landing in the hands of somebody federal or state or citywide that has an interest in trafficking. Not all of them. There's a whole other podcast we can do on, what type of pressure is put on law enforcement to do more around human trafficking. But there are lots of agents and departments and in law enforcement that have some real leaders and stakeholders that are wanting to get a look at any SAR that is related to human trafficking. Department of Homeland Security does a lot. They've got a big department. Over the last few years, they opened a human trafficking center.
Great.
So we're getting there.
When I started in banking, a lot of it came to in-person behavioral, and that's what we train employees to look out for. But now with the majority, you hardly see your customers anymore. Everything is on. There's no need for them to come to the branch anymore. So with that being said, all of our majority of the red flags has to be done through transaction and patterns and through industries and businesses. Yep. If we could go over a couple like unique other red flags, what you provided me is a red flags indicator, and we're going to give access to that to anybody to download and provide a link on our site. But I'd like to definitely go over some of the big ones with you of what banks should put in their AML systems and look for.
Yeah. Before we talk about the red flags, quickly, I was getting into, how red flags are important and understanding the typologies. But really, data and KYC and knowing your customer is what gives you a lot of context that you can add to the red flags. So one thing we do at the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative is we scrape illicit sex sites, massage parlor sites. We scrape the dark web. We scrape different forums and pull and run analytics on a wide variety of data. One of the data sets that we use often with financial institutions, and we also use it with law enforcement and retail industry, hospitality industry, but we call that our high-risk human trafficking data set. What that data set is over 1 million line items of data: names, telephone numbers, email addresses, business names, identifiers, physical identifiers like height, weight, and things like that. And it comes from the scraping of sex sites and massage parlor sites and forums. Right now, that data set is in we've got data from 131 countries. So we'll do operations with law enforcement, operations with financial institutions or proof of concepts, where we target either the whole data set based on their sophistication and manpower and ability to do this, or we target a state or a city. But they will scrub our data set. They'll cross-reference it against their customer base. It can tie into the, at account opening. It can tie in at the transaction level. If you have a sanctioned screening product that you like to run your bad guy list, your PEP list, and so forth through, we can do it at that level. And we've noticed, like I alluded to, is that they get hits usually off of an email address, a telephone number, or an address, which oftentimes is related to a business. That could be, a massage parlor, a nail salon, or something like that. And we've had a vast amount of success with that. A large bank that we work with used this data set and uncovered $5 million massage parlor ring throughout North America through this data set, in which they were all linked together from a corporate resolution perspective. So from ownership structure, and many times massage parlors are they're not a one-off ownership in a small town. They're owned by, there's multiple massage parlors, multiple entities owned by one organization or one person.
And I'd heard time again, and that's an easy one to kind of spot for bankers. Okay, you open up massage parlor, look at the location, and see if it makes sense by a transactional one, unless they're masquerading it. But for the most part, I mean, do they just accept cash? If they don't open a bank account or they funnel it in, how are you seeing them? They're probably not opening bank accounts with the title massage parlor. They're masking it as something else.
I mean, most of the time, the massage parlors do have bank accounts, because they either have to get licensed or they have requirements around their property and so forth. That's when it gets tricky, though, because they're now, think of any plot, think in your head about a plaza out where you live, or a variety of plazas. And if you were to think of, okay, there's about 5 different plazas near my house, and think about, out of those plazas, how many of them either have a nail salon, a massage parlor, or a Chinese
3
restaurant
within 2 miles.
Yeah. And when you think about that, sometimes they're one-off, but a lot of times the ownership structure and everything's connected between them all. And many times, whether it's a labor trafficking wise or sex trafficking wise, the workers are fluctuating between multiple massage parlors, restaurants, nail salons, some, oftentimes statewide, citywide, but sometimes just to mix things up and keep things fresh, they're transferring, they're shipping people every couple months or even less to different locations run through a network. And when you have employees and have folks working, a lot of times the traffickers or the people that run the businesses, they also have these people's passports, their IDs. They manage their money, if they even have any, or their accounts. They open bank accounts in the people's names, pretend that they're paying payroll, and by doing that, they have benefits and things that legitimize their business. Over the last several years, what we've also seen is a lot of massage parlors, nail salons, and different types of businesses that can be indicative of trafficking, going out and getting PPP loans.
I mean, but that seems like the easy one. As soon as they pop up in a community, I mean, doesn't law enforcement just go in there and check and go get a massage and see firsthand?
No, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. First of all, no, they don't. I don't know offhand, but if you were to search how many massage parlors exist in the U.S., how many gentlemen's clubs, strip clubs exist in the U.S., it's a very high amount. There's not enough manpower, bandwidth to do it, and not all strip clubs or massage parlors or nail salons. There's obviously, they're not all bad. So, we use other, they have to get out the message that these massage parlors and businesses that, hey, you can get this service here somehow. So you'll see there's sites like Rub Maps, if you've ever heard of that, big in the US and North America, but it's essentially a site. If you want to get a massage and you want a little extra, it's a site that they run reviews on it, and they hint you into the ones you can go to. Even if you're to look at like something like Yelp, or a basic business review type website, you can run searches for certain words and see that even in Yelp, people are talking about the massage parlors or the nail salons or the strip clubs, saying like, at these ones, there's more going on here. And it can either be in a positive way that they're happy
Yeah.
about that and reviewing, or they're disgusted and they saw something that was off,
So
and they're saying it
make
in
it
there. So we
does this
also
make it
scrape those
harder
reviews.
for your initiative and for law enforcement? If banks just say, you know what, we're not accepting any accounts from possible known industries, adult entertainment, where, okay, adult entertainment is legal, they have, different states, and there's a lot of state by state laws. But then if it's all going kind of underground and there's not somebody that is monitored to the best of the ability, does it get proliferated and harder to catch?
Um, you're a banker. I would never say. I mean, certain businesses, yeah, I would say don't pay potentially certain customers, but you know, just having the appropriate risk controls around it. So there is nothing wrong with banking massage parlors. I mean, chiropractors' offices, nail salons. I mean, if you're a financial institution that services your local community and you don't service those industries, you're throwing away piles and piles of dollars. And at the end of the day, banks, that's a big part of what it's about, right? So I would never tell a bank not to bank those industries, including, the you know, the sex industry. I mean, different sites and things like that. There's perfectly legal businesses around that. It's just a matter of when those legal businesses, allow too much, and then for the bank to understand which ones, and if their customers in said industry are doing above and beyond your expectation for them. So, building risk controls around that, like data, like if you're banking massage parlors, then the transactions should stop at 9 p.m. or whenever they close, right? They shouldn't be going all night. And then you're certain times of the week, maybe you notice certain things.
ATMs involved in.
New new employee, yeah, ATMs nearby. Your customer, if you're a local bank, or looking into a local area, seeing money taken out of the account late at night, and also at the massage parlor. There's a lot. There's so many indicators, but a lot of it relates to common sense. And I don't say that lightly, but when you're looking at an account that's flagged, or if you're working with someone like us that gives you a data set and you get a ping on one of these people, combining your information and understanding, like, does this make any sense? What could this be? Goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, know your customer, and then what activity your customer, reasonable belief of what that customer should be doing.
Yeah.
You know, that's the first and foremost. Now, are you seeing it easier with the proliferation of cryptocurrency? Is it making your job more difficult? Is it making law enforcement more difficult, easier?
Yep. So when I started the anti-human trafficking intelligence initiative, crypto was a big spot that I wanted to kind of sink my teeth in and do more. And so, when we started was shortly after the Backpage, when Backpage was taken down. And for those that aren't familiar with Backpage, it's like it's a site that's selling sex, more or less. Like a Craigslist, the private encounters, if anybody's familiar with the cases around that as well. But lots of human trafficking and child exploitation was going going through this site for many, many years. Law enforcement honed in on it, focused in on it. They got all the emails and information and credit card payments made. But the other thing that was happening on this site is you had to pay to post an ad. And so, lots of people paid with credit cards, which some of them were really their cards. Others were, ones that they had, fake cards or ones that were manufactured. But people also paid in crypto. And at the time, there was a lot of talk about focusing on investigations, but nothing was being done on the crypto side of people paying for those ads with crypto. And I took a lot of notice to that and really dove into that. So, when we started ATII, I started partnering with all the major crypto forensic asset tracing companies, building partnerships with them, learning more, spreading the word of human trafficking through crypto. Right now, we have a group called the Anti-Human Trafficking Cryptocurrency Consortium, the ATCC. Got over 50 major crypto-related exchanges, Bitcoin ATM companies, forensic crypto companies and data companies within that consortium doing good work. We scrape and index the dark web and how it factors in with crypto payments and so forth. Human trafficking still does take place on crypto via crypto as facilitating payment. But really where crypto really digs deep and is a problem is in child exploitation and CSAM, child sexual abuse material. There's a lot of pedophiles and people on the dark web and on the web in general that, have a problem and want to view this stuff and want to partake in it in real life and want to trade videos and content and scratch their itch that way. And just viewing, downloading, uploading, having child pornography is a crime. So they need to disguise themselves and huddle in groups and through forums and so forth. And the dark web is one of the big places that happens. And oftentimes crypto is used to pay for that. So, we've identified around 60,000 cryptocurrency sites that cryptocurrency dark websites that folks are doing this in. We track and investigate the addresses associated with these accounts and transactions. We pull metadata like IP addresses and ways of deconflicting and de-anonymizing crypto and the dark web and transactions and so forth. So we do a lot of cool, interesting, cutting edge stuff in that space, and that's a big focus for us because that's where we see the ability to make a big impact.
We use one of the major crypto companies to data mine transactions of our customers. Are you seeing many banks even going that far?
To vet,
yes, to make sure that their customers or their customers, if they're selling and buying cryptocurrency, verifying the wallets aren't coming from the dark web, using a cipher trace and elliptic.
Yep. Yeah, and we, those are the type of firms we partner with. Cipher Trace was one of our very, very first partners in the crypto space. Like I said, when I started ATII and was looking to do more in the space, first firm I talked to was Cipher Trace, and we've had a great relationship for 3 years. So, first of all, there's only so many banks that are banking crypto at this time, right? The larger ones, yes, definitely they're partnering and using services. It's still not at the point where crypto is being banked by financial institutions entirely mainstream in the US. I think that that's going to change even more so as time goes by. I think, like any business, I'm not opposed to banking crypto, and I think it would be foolish as a business not to, especially as it continues to grow, as long as you're building, the right risk controls around it and so forth. So one of the big ways to do that is to partner with a vendor like
Yeah.
CipherTrace, Elliptic, Chainalysis, and others. So the fact that you guys are doing that and monitoring, and at
I mean,
least,
what we found is it tells a more complete story when somebody uses crypto because you
yeah,
can see kind of where it came from and then after the fact. Because when you're doing transactions at a bank level, or if somebody withdraws cash or deposits cash, you never truly know where they got that cash or what they're doing with the cash after the fact.
yeah,
With crypto, you have
a lot of
you
trust.
may not have a exact picture, but you can have a window. So even if you have identified somebody that, you're watching, it doesn't warrant a SAR, but then you can come back later and put in that wallet address and that chain and see, oh my goodness, what did they do with that crypto after the fact? Then that could, lead
Yep.
you down another road and say, okay, now this is, a SARable offense.
Yep. Yep. And the great thing as well with those companies is they get dark web and crypto data related to human
Mm-hmm.
trafficking and child exploitation directly from us. So if you're using CipherTrace or another one of those companies, and
Chain
it
analysis.
Chainalysis, and something pops up and it's related to CSAM or trafficking, you'll likely get information on that. It'll be flagged in through your system, and then the reference point of where that information came from and the description will be from us.
Yeah. And
In
then
not all cases, but
and
in a
then,
lot.
bankers, if you are banking somebody that is buying and selling cryptocurrency, you need to make sure that they are running these programs.
Yeah,
'Cause it-
100. I mean, 100%.
yeah.
If you're going to bank a cryptocurrency exchange, you need to make sure that they have a dedicated compliance program. Staff is important to understand that, okay, you have a chief compliance officer that actually comes from the industry and is not just some, 25-year-old that didn't do anything
Oh,
before college. And when he landed his gig with his buddy, when he opened a cool exchange,
we've seen
that's a
all
lot
kinds.
often. Yep. And,
And
we
the
work,
canned AML program that you've seen
yep,
over and over again that they just bought from a firm, that is another telltale immediately.
yeah. And a lot of times, the other thing that we see a lot is that let's, let's say the firm is does buy CipherTrace, Chainalysis, Elliptic, and then they also buy an ID verification vendor that they run IDs through. A lot of times they just buy it, plug it in. They don't know how to use it. They don't optimize it. They don't, and it's like, oh, we have this, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but it has to be used, and you have to make sure that you have more than one person, if even one, that knows how to use it.
No,
Um,
we've seen over the years, customers, they have good intentions and they're checking the box, but at the end of the day, they're not comparing what they did. And they could have
yeah,
caught, okay, the address and everything you collected from your customer, and then you also pulled a LexisNexis or Reuters. So technically, you did everything right, but you didn't compare what LexisNexis and Reuters said to what your supposed customer gave you. So they're
yeah,
technically correct, but they didn't follow that extra step and put eyes on it and compare it. So
yeah. I do a lot of work in the crypto field, and I have for a while. I'm pro crypto. I'm all for it. Um, and I will say also that you know we partner with a lot of exchanges. Some of the ones that we partner with now, we would have never previously partnered with until um, you know you'll see that some of these firms that there's still plenty that are bad and haven't stepped to the plate yet, but many of the ones that, used to have some negative news on them have since hired a big time chief compliance officer that came from law enforcement. They've invested in a 30-person compliance staff. It's easy to see that they are headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because they want to be sustainable, and they want to continue to work in this industry, and their folks get involved in the different industry groups, and they speak and talk about their programs. So I guess I'll say also that the times are changing, and crypto is going to be here to stay. So hold these firms accountable if you're going to consider banking them. Make sure that you understand who their compliance staff are, who the leadership and the compliance staff on, and understand that they have a budget, that they're hiring X amount of people. They're buying tools and things. They're giving training on treat your decision to bank a certain exchange, very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had
on a case by case basis.
We had a
Exchange by
customer.
exchange, and
We had a customer that had applied. We have a vetting process when it has anything to do with money service business transmitting, and great intentions, but we had denied them based on some of the factors. And later they cleaned it up and came back, and that was great to hear. And then we looked there and saw that they did a lot with their program, and so they heeded what we said and then came back. And I feel a lot of times customers and clients that do that, they end up being better, and they just keep getting better. So
yeah, and I bet you for your sake, when they came back and you decided to add them and work with them, you probably documented that
absolutely.
hey, the details of that, and you can show a regulator. You can, they tried to work with us, we weren't having it, and they came back and have made big changes that we're now comfortable with.
Now that shows a lot. Yeah, looking through the red flags on specific cryptocurrencies. I agree with them. You got a lot of good content. We're gonna provide a link to all of this. It keeps. You've got a ton of information here, Aaron. Just wonderful. I always find it sometimes difficult as as a banker, we see like maybe half of the ledger. We may see things are being deposited from a point of sale system, but it's really the card providers that have all the detail of the individual transactions and everything. So we get frustrated to where we can't find that extra data from the merchant processor or the issuer of the major exchanges. I won't name them because then I'll have a lawsuit real quick, but they don't do enough, in my opinion, where they're seeing transactions first before all of us when swiping credit cards.
Yeah, agreed. And it's hard as a banker to get that other side of the story. It's also hard in law enforcement, especially if you have one bank or financial institution that's working well with you, and you have a good rapport, and you're even if you send a subpoena. But when it comes to crypto and different payment service providers, we keep track for law enforcement and for ourselves the ones that are responsive to subpoenas, that are easy to work with, and the ones that aren't. And there are a lot of exchanges and companies that a lot of them that just won't respond to a subpoena.
Wow.
You'll never get information from them. And then there's other ones that, and I won't name names, some of them are big, well-known ones that have historically never really responded, now are responding, but they're a year behind or more on any subpoena request. And so the obvious thing to do is hire more people and dedicate resources to be able to get through the subpoenas and work with law enforcement, so you don't end up getting a cease and desist order and getting shut down or fined $50 million, right?
Yes.
But for some reason, these organizations aren't doing that. So somebody needs to hold them accountable. If you're not responding to subpoenas, and you're in this country or doing business with this country and have satellite offices here, you need to respond and within a certain time period. And if you're not, they need to be held accountable.
And we've found over the years, if it was, a subpoena, and you can kind of tell who wrote the subpoena that they don't know what they're looking for. And it's so broad, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to take, now it's gotten a lot easier to research items, but in years past, it said this is going to take, 50 man hours of going through old, sourcing and getting copies and everything. And then calling them and having a conversation, they narrow it down. This is what I really need. Okay, great. And get it to them right away.
And that's a real situation. That's a real situation too,
Mhm.
right? I've been on that side of being in-house and getting a subpoena and being like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
How am I going to look up everything that they're asking for? And number two, do they even understand what they're
Correct.
asking for?
Because a lot of times they don't.
Because we talked about that earlier, right? With only so many folks understand banking and products and services that are in law enforcement and sending subpoenas. Yeah. That being said, like you said, have the conversation. I'll make the excuse that the reason that these organizations aren't responding to the subpoenas is not because they're hard and difficult and seem stupid when they receive them. It's just because they don't give a shit.
I agree with you. And that's, that comes down to the proliferation of fintechs and, their partnership, or it's, with banks and institutions where, banks were held to a standard. Well, the bank needs to hold their customers to that exact same standard. Just because they're going to get hit first, technically, the bank is still responsible. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most of law enforcement, if you're in that position and you give them a call and have a willingness to help, you can probably work out helping them without spending 24 hours on every little thing in the broad-based.
And I think it would be even easier with the crypto exchanges because they can easily data mine. Here's all the transactions. Here's here's the data we collected when we took on the new account.
Yep.
So,
which oftentimes isn't a lot anyway. So
no,
maybe those subpoenas wouldn't really.
Yeah, we hark on source of funds, because there may be a lot of transactions that aren't suspicious, but if you don't know the source of funds, they're suspicious. So, if we can weed out the non-suspicious and really focus in on, the bad actors, that would be great. So, but, Aaron,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I know we could talk all day and get into these. I'm going to provide links. And if there's any other additional links that you would provide, I'll put it in the show notes. And, where can we find you? If listeners and bankers want to contact you, how can they contact you?
Yep. We're at www.followmoneyfightslavery.org. We have social media. We're big on LinkedIn more than any other social. We have stuff on Facebook, but our website and our public facing appearance and what we do around human trafficking is focused on working with financial institutions, commercial organizations, government, other NGOs. So you'll see a lot of information on the website. If you work in law enforcement or intelligence or operations, tactical and intelligence around human trafficking or CSAM, you can reach out and there's a lot of information that's not on the website that we can.
We're going to provide all those links, and it's great. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me and letting the message get out to your audience on what we do and how important this is to the financial
thank
industry.
You so much for your service. And this is truly, the work that you guys are doing, and I've seen it firsthand of you're giving actionable and detail and it's available for banks and exchanges to utilize. I mean, you're free to give them all of your hard work to combat and spot it. So, kudos to you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Ryan.
Thank you for listening to the Paper Podcast. That was just a great episode. Aaron is just an amazing person. The work that he does and all the free information that he provides bankers, let me know what your thoughts on this. We're going to put in links to where you can contact Aaron, where you can get the typologies, the typesets, the red flags. These things, if they're not in your AML system, they've got to be. I mean, you just have to input them in. You have to, have training, go over this with your staff. Employee, we got to do our part. This is something that we should all be behind. We need to do our part on human trafficking. Thanks again for listening to the show.